Okay, we might as well kick this off. First of all, welcome to everyone who's joined today. Our webinar is on traditional pen testing is dead. What's next? So before I hand you over to the guys, let me just run through a few housekeeping topics. If you wouldn't mind switching over the slide, please, Declan. Thank you. So ultimately, look, the goal of today is to educate you all on the value of Ekco's new approach to pen testing, which we've called ethical hacking as a service. So feel free to screenshot any of the slides as we run through the presentation. But with that said, we are going to be recording this presentation, so we will send it on to anybody who signed up and didn't get to join, or anybody who is on the call at the moment. And we'll share that link tomorrow via email. Now onto the team. My name is Kirsten Savage-Lyons. I look after marketing here in Ireland in Ekco. And you obviously know the guys from Ward Solutions. We have Declan Timmins, who's our Director of Cybersecurity Consultancy. And I'm sure anybody who has gotten pen testing with us before has met Declan. And also with us here is Daniel Hahn, and Daniel is one of our pen testers and ethical hackers. So both of the guys are going to be chatting about the drawbacks of a traditional pen test versus what they kind of come up with this new, and what brought them to develop this new service. We invite your comments and questions. So there's a chat box at the end of your screen. I don't know if many of you might be on phone or laptop. You should be easily able to get into that chat box, and you can ask a question throughout the presentation. We may answer it throughout or at the end, depending on time. And I think we're ready to go on to the next slide, please, Declan. So first, I'll run through the agenda. So initially, we'll start off with what is a traditional pen test. Then we'll get into why ethical hacking as a service, what's involved in ethical hacking as a service, the service comparisons of the two, the benefits, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. But first, I would like to start off with a quick poll. So the question is, when was the last time your business conducted a pen test? So that should be on your screen now. If you wouldn't mind just giving us your answers. And they are in the past 12 months, in the past 1 to 3 years, more than 3 years ago, or never. Great. I'll give you 5 more seconds to answer if anybody wants to. Okay. So definitely you'll be happy to know we have 55% in the last 12 months, 36% in the last 1 to 3 years, and 9% are never.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because, that's probably what we see in the market as well, that people tend to try do traditional pen testing mostly annually. Industry best practice would say annually, but I would say when there's a huge risk or a risk that you have identified. So, and thanks for that. Thanks for the great introduction, and thanks for bringing along myself and Daniel to have a conversation around this topic. So then just jumping into, what's a traditional pen test, maybe Daniel, you could run through and give us your ideas of how you approach.
Yeah. Thanks, Declan. Yeah, I'll quickly go through a traditional pen test. So number one here, we have the scope is clearly defined and focused. So when a client schedules a pen test, there's always a clear scope given to the tester. This is usually in the form of a URL or a set of IP addresses, and authorization is only given for the scope. So that means from our end, our hands are bound legally, so we can't test anything that's out of scope. And something that might seem vulnerable at first glance that we find that's just out of scope, the most we can do at this point is really notify the client. And if they want it to be tested again, we have to go through that whole scheduling process. So next one there, Declan. Yeah, number two. So this ties in well with the last point. The attack surface is limited. So we have a limited attack surface due to a strict scope. So this might lead a client into a false sense of security, thinking, great, we've secured our website, that's public facing, but there might be holes existing in the perimeter elsewhere that the client hasn't even considered. And really, in reality, like, a hacker doesn't have a scope, and their attack surface is much wider than ours. So they have no limitations on tools or avenues of attack. So something that the organization hasn't even considered in scope may be the reason for a cybersecurity incident. And that actually brings us nicely into our next one, which is the business value of the systems may not be considered. So this is very common, and it essentially means that the client isn't looking at the big picture. So clients often retest the same systems year after year without taking into account the necessary GRC work to come up with something like a risk register and prioritize the sensitive systems. So they may just think, let's test our website each year because that's what's open to the public, and they may not spend the time and resources to properly secure the systems that will inevitably take down the company. So your perimeter security could be state of the art, and all it will take is an employee clicking on a link and poor security on the internal network, and maybe you didn't protect your backup server, and now you have ransomware encrypting your data, and you have no way to really recover that data.
That's interesting, Daniel. And from a governance point of view and a GRC point of view, it's really interesting. And a lot of our clients, we don't have the time or to spend to try understand that and to gather that information of everything they need to test in their environment and try prioritize, the correct place to spend your budget. So what we're aiming here really for is your effective use of your limited budget and resources to make sure that you're spending the money in the right place that are trying to mitigate some risks in your environment. And the first stage in that is to gather all the things that you need to test into a single place and then prioritize them based on the business value. So it's pointless doing a brochureware website, let's say, that has no real value to the business, where you have a huge site that taking credit card details and you're selling all your products on, or again something on your perimeter where you're running a service that allows your clients to connect to. So it's really important that we look at that business value and do that governance. And the proposal for this new service, I suppose, is something that we're trying to add that piece in and to try help collaboratively with the client to understand that.
Exactly. The next point, please. Okay, now we're getting on to the scheduling. The scheduling of the test is ad hoc, so there's always issues with scheduling a pen test. It takes time to plan and organize a test, and also the client often needs a test done for a certain date. They may have deadlines to meet for a system to go live, and Ward usually also have a lead time of around 4 to 6 weeks. So obviously this is going to cause some conflicts between us and the client.
Yeah, again, from managing the team, I come across that all the time. Trying to be better, really good scheduling resource in Ward, and she really helps to try line up those resources with the work that needs to get done. But through nobody's fault, things get pushed out. Developers delay the launch of a site. They need to move things around a little bit, and we need to be flexible in that. And sometimes we can deliver that flexibility, but sometimes we can't. And that causes challenges on both sides, I suppose. So again, difficult scheduling is difficult if you don't know in advance and you haven't planned for this test and set it up.
Yep. Yeah, so that leads into this again. The system information needs to be gathered each time. So each time there's a pen test, both parties need to take the time to gather all the required information. From our end, we need to speak to the people who know the systems. So whether they're developers or business owners, this is so we can understand how the system works, the information that's processed, stuff like the size of the system, and this will help us estimate the time taken. And from the client side, they may need to find these relevant people. That might take time. They need to set up the calls, gather the information that we need. And this has to happen even if it's the same system. If it's being tested every month, every year, we still need to go through this process. And also, we often assign different testers to each test. So that's another reason we need to go through this. It's important to go through it every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a key pain point for both of us, both the clients and ourselves. We should be better at keeping that information, but we're not. The clients themselves equally, they should keep that information in a central spot. So that, again, going back to the kind of governance of the testing you need to do, to understand there's a single source of all the things that you need to test, and you're using that single source to try address and prioritize what needs to get tested and understand what has been tested in the past. So historically, what if your website's been tested, there's a link to it, a report there, and the report findings are, being dealt with. So you can have that single view of all your testing requirements in a single document somewhere.
Yep. So number 6, please. Yep. Scope and call to understand the client requirements. Okay, so this again is something that we need to do every single time for a test. Again, it doesn't matter how often the system is being tested. We have to get confirmation of the scope. We have to ensure that it is correct, and we have to get that covered in the authorization form that we send to the client.
Yeah, absolutely. And that causes difficulty. Again, there's more time spent with the client. It's more on the client side, allocating resource to go on those calls, allocating the other resource that we to understand exactly what the scope is. And then agreeing and getting the authorization signed and, getting it through their processes as well as ours.
And again, this ties into number 7, the admin, the admin overhead, and that we need to arrange this. So this is again, is for both parties. They'll usually have to configure access, gather all the necessary people, organize the calls, and schedule everything, and prepare the systems in some way for testing. This can all take time. This is time that's taken away from testing time, and that can be annoying for us and for the client as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I suppose the key points here are, that we have to repeat these steps numerous times across the year. So every time you come to us for a pen test, it's an ad hoc, arrival with us. We set up these calls, gather information, you get it into a scoping document, get it out to clients. The client have to get through the procurement and okay that engagement. And then we need to get into scheduling. So it takes quite a bit of work, and it's repetitive across the year if you're doing it numerous times. So, why not just do it once? Essentially is what we're trying to do. So then just, I suppose, moving on, so why do clients come to us for a pen test? So every day we have new people coming into us looking for a pen test. And typically, we have clients who come in from a compelling event or incident. So they've had an incident and, they've had a data breach or some sort of vulnerability, or they've noticed something in their environment that they're concerned about. So they want to, validate, that there's nothing else there, post incident, they've contained that incident and they're looking at their website, let's say, and saying, are there some vulnerabilities left behind by the hacker or the bad actors? A checkbox, so a compliance checkbox. So, organizations do have compliance requirements. We understand that. And, some organizations typically, every 6 months or a year, they need to have a new report on that infrastructure piece or that web application to align with their compliance requirements. But ideally, we'd like to see people come to us to validate the security posture of the system. So if they do that in advance, maybe you won't have that compelling event or instance. So you're not going to have that data breach. So ideally, you're trying to focus on, where are the high risks. Let's address those high risks by doing and validating the posture of that system. And then obviously that's going to feed into your compliance. So, you'll have that report, you'll have this centralized repository of all the testing that's been done. So if somebody comes in to audit you, you're going to have this testing runbook where you can point the auditor to the runbook and say, this is exactly what we tested. This is how we prioritize what we tested. So, we're doing the best we can addressing risks in the limited budget and resources that we've got. So now that we killed off pen testing, I know you were duped into this, and we're going to talk about this new service, but we're actually just vying for a bit of work for Daniel because he's out of work now. So, hopefully we can pick up a few engagements for Daniel going forward now that he's killed off this traditional pen testing. So, what are clients telling us? So, we don't change what we do, I suppose, based on having great ideas ourselves. So it's typically clients come to us and tell us there's some problem that we need to address, and clients are telling us, the gaps that we see with the traditional ad hoc pen testing is, the pen testing budget is too narrowly focused. So you were focused on this web application, repeatedly doing the same application or your internet perimeter or whatever it might be. You just repeat the same tests. And clients do come to us and say, just repeat what we did last year. Just repeat the same test again. Maybe it's changed slightly and maybe there's an extra IP range in there or whatever it might be. But typically, it's the same test again. Let's do that. And then that'll prove that we're secure. But that's very limited, and you're not really effectively using your budget and resources, I suppose, in doing that. And then clients are saying, repetitive pen testing fatigue. The similar results. We've clients who do the same test over and over again. They get the same results. Slightly different. Maybe some small thing has changed, but they're typically getting the majority of results are the same. you know, so are really getting return on investment for that test over time. And then, you know, clients are interested in adding a bit of variety to cyber testing. So they don't, and not only the clients, like the testers themselves would like to add a bit of variety, you know, because, you know, it makes it interesting, you know, it hones their skills, you know. So
that's true. We're getting web app pen tests week after week. Wouldn't mind something a bit more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it hones your skills. It gives you a bit more variety from the client perspective. You're testing different areas, and you know, maybe you're highlighting areas where they need to address. And you're more mimicking what real hackers do. So, you know, the techniques and approach that a real hacker will do, you know, because, you know, that's our ultimate aim, to act like a hacker, so that then when the hacker comes along, you've closed all those windows, as Daniel said, you know, window into your environment. Like we were trying to close those windows and identify them when they're open. And then testing flexibility, quick retest, again, a big pain point for clients. You know, we did a traditional pen test. You know, we found them, we made really good recommendations to close all those windows into that environment. And the client goes off and fixes all with the developers, you know, work with developers to get all those recommendations in place and, you know, close off all those vulnerabilities. And then they need to validate and say, before we launch, God, we need to recheck to make sure that we've done this right. So it'll come back to us typically and say, you know, can you do a quick retest, you know, a couple of days, make sure and validate those results in the previous report. And again, that's very hard to fit into the schedule, because it's not, you know, it's ad hoc again, you're coming at the last minute. There's no, you know, it's difficult to figure out how long it's going to take for those developers to fix those problems. So you don't know when you can schedule this retest, let's say. But hopefully in a new service, that's something that we, an issue that we might need to address or try to address. And then overall, I suppose the effort required to scope, purchase, schedule, manage, you know, annual pen testing requirements, you know, it's a big effort on the client side. And I know, like, people are busy, you know, they've got lots of other things to be doing as well, you know, and this is only one part of your role as a cybersecurity professional in some of our client organizations. You know, so, you know, we're trying to help you with that. And on our side as well, you know, we have these processes where, you know, we need to scope and all the usual stuff and gather that information and have that permission to do testing, you know, because that's what ethical hacking is, you know. So you are giving us permission to test your environment. So these are the kind of gaps that we're seeing and the clients are telling us about. And that's the real driving force to try and move away from this traditional, you know, ad hoc pen testing across the year to some sort of a service that makes this easier for both sides, for the client and ourselves. And then we have a poll there. So, you know, from those things that we listed there on the previous slide, you know, which pen testing gap do you feel resonates most with you? And maybe Kirsten might put up that poll.
So I'm going to try and relaunch this poll. So yeah, just to bring it back, which pen testing gap do you feel resonates most with you? So of the last gaps that on the last slide, do you find there's been too narrow a focus? There's testing fatigue, a lack of variety to what's being tested, flexibility with the testing, so you feel that it's not flexible enough, or there's huge efforts required from your end. So I'll give you maybe 30 more seconds to kind of read through them and see which of these resonate with you the most.
I suppose it is multiple choice as well, so you can pick a few if you're just one more.
That's something I should have said. Yeah, there might be more than one. And I also apologize for the last 20 minutes. There's been no noise my end, and I have workers in the back. And as soon as my bit came up, so I'm going to mute myself for a minute.
Joys of working from home.
I know. I thought it might be quieter at home than in the office, but not today. Okay, so this is actually quite mixed. So far we're at 10% too narrow focus, 30% testing fatigue, 30% lack of variety. We've seen 20% testing flexibility, 50% feel that there's a huge amount of effort on their side. So that's where, Daniel, you really need to step up your game and start actually pulling the finger out. And we've one other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I will end that now.
And that's really good feedback, you know, so that's what we need. We like to, you know, kind of help the clients and make sure that we're delivering the right services in the right way, you know. So like that feedback is brilliant for us, because then we can, you know, hone that service to make sure that we're hitting all those key points where your pain points are. So I suppose that was the driving force to put this
Just
service.
to finish on that, Declan, I just had a comment come in. The one person that clicked other, he said the biggest gap is the lack of retesting once findings have been communicated. So that's something that you kind of mentioned internally to us. If you want to elaborate on that a bit.
Absolutely, and that's something that we see, and we feel your pain as a client. We understand that the business wants you to launch this web application or whatever, and it's has to go within days. And you've done your due diligence, you've done your pen test. We've addressed, or we found or identified those vulnerabilities. So Daniel's doing a great job finding all your problems and giving you all the recommendations to fix. But then, like, trying to get those fixed because you weren't expecting maybe to have so many vulnerabilities there, and there might be a good piece of work to be done by the developers, maybe those third-party developers, so you don't have full control of them. And so we understand like that, it's difficult to figure out when you need that retest. And that's what we're trying to address as well, trying to figure out, how can we best deliver that retest to you, because we want you to be able to move on and launch that site and make money from that site. Like, that's our aim. We want to work with your business and try to help you. So, if we can push that into the new service, which is one of the elements of this new service, I suppose, it's a really important part of it. So then I suppose, look, why ethical hacking as a service? Apart from the fact of keeping Daniel in a job, so we won't be letting him off next week. We had to push the service out. Yeah. So like, why is ethical hacking? So the kind of formal definitions here is ethical hacking involves an unauthorized attempt to gain unauthorized access to a computer system or application. And carrying out an ethical hack involves duplicating strategies and actions by malicious attackers. So essentially, what does that mean? So it means you're giving us permission to do an attack on your website or your infrastructure. So the key thing here is that we're authorized. So we have that permission, we have that authorization. You signed it to say that we give you permission. And as Daniel mentioned earlier, sometimes the scope is very limited, so we can only work within that authorization and to make sure that we're ethically attacking your organization. So then moving on to the service itself and what includes. So as I said, those gaps is what we tried to address. We thought, let's add a bit of flexibility into testing. Let's add a bit of variety into testing. Let's add a bit of flexibility into testing. So we looked at the service that we deliver currently, all the different types of testing that we might do, and try to package them up as options into this service. And looking at those options, then maybe Daniel, you can give us an idea how we do these web application pen testing.
Yeah, this is my area now. So we'll run through web app pen test first. So essentially, you can look at a website and a web application as a window into your database. So it has various avenues of attack, and if not secured correctly, it can expose your data. So this may be open ports. Maybe you've got vulnerable WordPress add-ons, outdated software, stuff like that. And essentially our aim and your goal as well is to secure these avenues of attack and ensure that data is secure. So how we usually go about this is we run our scans, we look for these areas of attack, and we test them manually as well. So we also look well at stuff like session management and how your application authorizes certain requests. And I had a good example of this experience I had a few months ago was a website I was testing had a button, and all you had to do was click this button as an admin to get to the admin page. And all I did was copy out the HTML code from that button, transferred that button into a session with a normal user, and clicked on this button. And as a normal user, I was then able to get access to the admin panel. So that's just an example of how easy sometimes it is, and how, bad practices and not authorizing certain requests can lead to something very serious in an application.
Yeah, I suppose then from a business perspective, like, if you look at an analogy, like your web application is a window into your database. So your database is where all your information is. So if you're going to sell something, the price of that item, the list of those items are for sale are in there. The price that you're going to command for that item is in there. All your client, the database of all your contacts for your clients. So there's lots of information in that database. And this, what Daniel is trying to test here is look at those windows, look at the places where you can input data into that database, and see if that allows you to take data from the database. So really that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to close off all those windows to make or identify the windows that are open, identifies if they should be open and there's a valid reason for having them open. And if there's no valid reason for having them open, there is some vulnerability there, to identify them, go back to yourself and say, okay, these are your problems. And if a bad actor gets into your database, like, it's game over. You know, they can steal all your information and, you know, publish it on the web. They can potentially try to purchase something. So, you know, a TV is, you know, $3,000, and you can change that to €3, and, you know, set up that purchase. Next thing, I've got a $3,000 telly for a huge discount from your organization. You know, so you need to avoid people getting into your backend database. The window to your database is your web application. That's what Daniel does, and he does it very well. Good selling, Peter. I'll get you a job yet, Daniel.
Yeah, so we'll go on to the next one, please, which should be mobile pen testing. Yeah, so for mobile pen testing, a lot of the same concepts get carried over. You know, mobile applications usually get coupled with the website, and they will hold the same data, and they are still another way to access that same database. So a lot of the same concepts get carried over. We look at, you know, we scans, we do the session management, stuff like that. Where the difference really comes is that we focus more on the quality of the code. So we do this by performance-specific analysis, static and dynamic analysis, which basically analyzes the application when it's not running and when it's running. So that's how we find the various vulnerabilities there in mobiles. Number 3 here is infrastructure penetration testing. So this is kind of a catch-all for a few different types of pen tests. So we usually look at the external perimeter, the internal network, and Wi-Fi pen testing. So for the internet perimeter, your public-facing systems, this again, you can look as a window into your internal environment, and they often have open and closed ports, and these can be seen as the access points. So that's basically what we do. We use scanners to scan these ports. We use manual techniques as well. We look for vulnerable services on these ports. We make sure that these services are up to date, or if they're not, we exploit them further. For the internal network, same concept, where we scan the network, look for vulnerable services running on machines, open ports, stuff like that. We also do things like configuration reviews. So we do configuration reviews on servers against the CIS benchmarks. We assess user endpoint devices, and we do Wi-Fi pen testing as well, which is mainly a configuration review. And if the company are using passwords, we try and crack these passwords as well.
And that's interesting again, you know, and again, keeping the same analogy, like, you know, those ports that are available on your internet perimeter, that's your first line of defense. So if, again, there's windows open in that line of defense, you get access, and it's a view into your world. So it's a window into your world and your internal infrastructure. All the damage that can be done in there to get through that window, you know. So like there's lots of good things that you need to try to keep the hackers out from. And as I said, that first line of defense is your internet perimeter. I suppose then, you know, adding a bit of variety. So we're saying that all these services will be included in this new ethical hacking as a service, as options. The first 3 are probably more traditional type pen testing anyway, you know, web application, mobile, they're things we've normally done ad hoc, but we're trying to add them into the mix because there is a valid reason for doing them at times. But also, you know, if you look at effective use of your limited budget and resources, we're looking at it's widely accepted that about 80% of breaches were due to human vulnerability, but yet we spend all our time doing the cyber testing on technologies. So why aren't we spending more time, you know, addressing the human vulnerability? And, you know, how can we do that? So we need to add that into the service, to add that variety, widen that attack surface, to understand that we're testing all the areas that attacker might address. And one of those key areas is social engineering or red teaming. So like social engineering is typically, you know, making phishing calls against your staff, you know, going on calls to your call center, trying to obtain passwords and credentials for your environment. Getting into your office itself, you know, physically getting past your receptionist, going in and stealing something, or getting access to a server, or taking photographs around your environment. You know, looking on LinkedIn and, you know, seeing who works with you, maybe sending them out phishing emails. They're targeted in different individuals, you know, seeing if any of their email accounts have been compromised. There's a wide range of things we can do in there. And red teaming and traditional or Tiber red teaming, which is a more structured version of red teaming, is just that. It's kind of do anything that a hacker might do against you. And the first thing we address with the clients is, give me a trophy that I need to obtain. So that trophy could be something like a domain admin password or a credentials for an account. It could be access to a really important network share. You know, so we agree what that trophy is, and then working with Daniel and the team, we decide, you know, what's the best approach to try get to there. So one approach might be, you know, we'll get past reception, we'll bring a laptop in, we'll plug it into a network point in your environment, we'll run some scripts, move laterally across, get into that network area and steal those files and walk away. In traditional social engineering, if I don't get past receptionist, I can't continue with that attack, and that attack has been thwarted. But the attack has only been thwarted on the day that the receptionist has been really good and understand and being suspicious about people going past her. The day that she's not there, you're gone past. So the Tiber.ie concept of red teaming is just that, you know, we would assume that, okay, if you failed at the first hurdle and you didn't get past reception, let's assume you did. So go and test the next stage, and you test each of the lines of defense across into that network share to see which ones will stop you and which ones won't. So you're not making assumptions that that next line of defense is going to work. You're just saying that we need to test that. So again, kind of from a social engineering and from a widening of your attack surface, you know, we're adding in these testing of individuals and testing of process and testing of systems. And that's what all this red team and social engineering is about. And it's a good thing to do some testing in that area. And some clients do, you know, so we do some testing for clients in social engineering, and we've been pretty successful. I'd say probably the easiest way to compromise an organization is to do some social engineering, because, you know, Daniel and the guys are really experienced pen testers, and they look for vulnerabilities and very technical look at an environment. But if I ring up on a Friday afternoon and I ask for the domain admin password and I'm given it, well, that thwarts all your work, you know. So, and I've done that like on a Friday afternoon. In 5 minutes, I took a domain admin of a huge organization, and literally just on a call. Yeah, look, Jack here. I'm working with John, the IT manager, trying to install some printers. There's a big board meeting here in the boardroom. John's gone off to a meeting. He gave me the password on a piece of paper after using it. Any chance you can help me out? The lads here said you might be able to help me. Just, you know, I'm really under pressure here. You know, is there anything you could do for me? The guy says, yeah, no problem. Have you got a piece of paper? Write down the domain admin password. Yeah. Just game over for the whole organization. You know, I
think that's a really interesting one, because, you know, companies are spending thousands every year on state-of-the-art defense, and, you know, if you look at the cyber statistics every year, the majority of attacks are coming from poor end user practices, and, you know, all that money spent becomes redundant once some user clicks a link and, as you say, gives away a password.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the example of the HSE, which everybody has heard about in Ireland and across Europe and the world, I suppose, you know, there's 100,000 staff in the HSE. So 100,000 people, one individual clicked a phishing email attachment, and it caused 4 months of our health service to be down, and it's still not back. You know, so like that is incredible, that just one individual, and that's all we need. Like, we're doing it from a red team and our social engineering point of view. We just need that one person, that one hole in your defenses. So a good thing to add into the service we taught. And then the last one is breach attack simulation. Pretty reasonably new, I suppose. So this is a concept where, you know, we'll replicate actual attacks, so technically replicate the attacks. So we've got a cloud-based agent, which will run about, I think, 9,000 to 10,000 different variants of ransomware and malware against your environment. So we talk about attack vector. So it's from that cloud agent to an endpoint. The endpoint is sitting somewhere in your infrastructure, and all the devices that protect that endpoint are being tested, because those attacks are running through those different devices. So, you know, either it's detected, so the attacks are detected, and great, we get detected quite a few of them, and then some are protected again, so it drops that prevents that piece of code from activating. But then some get through, and they're the ones we're interested in. You know, which ones are we not protected, or we're not detecting or not protected against? So, you know, a good thing to do every now and again. It gives you a security score. So, you know, the concept is it would be done continuously, but we can do one-off engagement with BAS. You'll get a score. So let's say your score is 90, and you make some changes in that environment. You change some firewall rules, and that score drops to 70. Well, then you realize, God, you know, the changes I've made aren't correct. It's open up more vulnerabilities. There's more stuff getting through. So let's go back and look at that change, and let's change it out again. Or equally, if you look at the difference between your corporate environment and your home environment, remote working, we're all working remotely, and your score in your corporate environment might be up 95 or whatever, because there's loads of good technologies around you there to protect you. When you move home, that's going to drop to, maybe below 90. So there's not as much technology helping you and protecting you when you're sitting at home in your own environment.
Yeah. I think that's one that always surprises the clients, because they have the antivirus software, and not to scare anyone, but like your antivirus software won't block every attack, and oftentimes what's blocked in Sophos won't be blocked in McAfee. Like they all have different sets of signatures to block the malware. So it's good for clients to get these signatures, see the ones that pass through the antivirus, and either send them to their antivirus provider or implement them.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I say, this new service, we dreamt up overnight, and trying to keep Daniel in work and the guys, so we put together this. They're all options there. It's akin to on the governance side, we've got a service called CISO as a service. So you are assigned a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, an Information Security Officer, and he or she will deliver all your governance. To work with you collaboratively and try to deliver all those governance pieces. And on the pen testing side now, we're trying to replicate that type of service, so that you're assigned your own pen tester who will work with you and become your trusted partner on the testing side, and work with you to understand what the priority of testing. So if we look at a straightforward service comparison, traditional pen testing, as we said, limited testing surface area. Ethical hacking, it's a wider testing surface area. Repetitive results for traditional pen testing, you're getting the similar results or doing the same testing over and over again. Variety results in new insights on the new service. Inflexible, we got to stick to the scope. We set up a very clear scope and authorization. We have to stick to that. We're legally obliged to stick to that. With the ethical hacking, you can work with your assigned pen tester to, have flexible testing, refocus each month, have discussions and collaborative discussions around what makes sense for that organization. Traditional pen testing, we collect test parameters once or each time rather, and we had to keep collecting them every time we do a scope call. On the ethical hacking, we're going to put together this concept of a testing run book. So your assigned pen tester will gather all the information, put into one central location, and use that central location or that Excel file to understand exactly how you should prioritize and what the value of each of those different systems to the business, because it's important to understand the business value when you're looking at the risks. Traditional pen testing is ad hoc, difficult to schedule and resource. We all have our challenges in that area, and we're hoping that we'll have a scheduled ethical hacking, essentially, which you'll meet with your assigned pen tester once a month or once a quarter and agree what you need to do going forward. But again, working with that individual, you'll be able to maybe add some flexibility and address those issues where you're trying to do a quick test, which you don't need a full formal report on, let's say. Limit prioritization or governance. So, that's our experience with traditional pen testing is people don't really look at governance and the value of the thing we're trying to test. Whereas with the collaborative approach, we're going to do that with your assigned pen tester. Focus on a single service. On traditional pen testing, access to the full range of cyber testing, which we kind of detailed in the previous slide there in the new service. So then, I suppose, what are the key benefits of them? Why would you want this new service? Like we've talked to clients and we took the feedback and we found all these gaps in what we're doing currently. And we put together this kind of a catch-all number of options that we, would try to help address those gaps, I suppose. And I suppose the very first one, which is important, is a dedicated resource assigned. So, you're going to get a Daniel to go, to work with your developers and work with yourselves, become that trusted pen tester. And he's got lots of experience, and the rest of the team got lots of experience as well, and they can share that experience. So, it's really important. They're your expert. They're the person, going to give you advice on what should be tested and what sort of vulnerability you found in other environments, and work with you to make sure that you're getting your best bang for your buck, like to make sure that you're using that limited budget and resources as effectively as possible. And that makes sense, because I think Daniel then, obviously he'll be able to gain experience of how your developers work, the different systems you use, the importance they are to the business as well, so he's a lot more experienced and a lot more focused. And each time he does a pen test, he's adding to that run book, so adding more information about the parameters, getting a better experience and an understanding of the environment and the things he needs to test. Does that resonate with you, Daniel?
It does indeed.
Absolutely. So then I suppose that the next key thing is reduced management overhead. So I think from the poll there, people did say, they're having issues of trying to manage and organize and get POs for all these ad hoc testing across the year. And it's always a struggle. It's left till the last minute, and next thing you don't have a resource, or you can't get through procurement effectively. We're offering the full range of our cyber testing, so they're all there. The only additional in the testing that's available at BAS is one particular one we have to pay a license into a piece of software for that. So there is a kind of an additional cost on BAS, but the others are just like kind of a daily rate engineering dates. Wider attack surface, adding that. So trying to address that 80% of breaches having a human vulnerability, and trying to push out the testing into that area to make sure that you're covered in that area and you're not, not going to be exposed like the HSE to that one person in your environment who clicks on the link and gets rid of all that good testing you've done on technologies. And then more flexible, working collaboratively with Daniel and the team, like to understand what needs to get done, to try, schedule it in kind of a working together partnership, rather than saying we have to go back to scheduling, I'm not assigned this week, I'm off on another pen test somewhere else, like that. We can't kind of address your concerns and try to address your requirements. And obviously it's more aligned to what a hacker does. So we're not just focusing on one, we're not just continuously looking at your web app and your internet perimeter. We're going to look at everything, and that's again where Daniel and the team bring in that dedicated resource, because they've got the experience of things they've seen in other environments. So, in your environment, maybe you should focus on this area because I've seen things happening over there as well. And let's have a quick look around there and see what's going on. And finally, I suppose it's more effective use of your testing budget, because we're focusing on risk. So your budget should be spent to address a risk or mitigate a risk. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to add that governance piece in so that you understand that you're spending your money in the right place and your resources in the right place, and then having the flexibility to move that focus, across the year, rather than just be stuck with that one plan across the whole year, which gives you that bit of flexibility. And then I suppose of the benefits listed, what appeals to you most? Like it'd be really good to get feedback on that, to understand, maybe we need to push a certain area more than another, or maybe we need to address some other concerns that you might have in the area. And it'd be nice to be able to get that feedback and to then understand what's the big appeal to you and the benefit of this new proposed service. I have to say we piloted this with a number of clients and found it really beneficial, and typically, it came about because one client in particular was doing that continuously for the last 3 years. They've been continuously pen testing the same thing over and over again, and called us in and we had a chat about it, and said, really fatigued with this, that seems pointless. We're just spending budget over and over again on the same kind of testing. We're getting the same results, nothing has changed, nothing to see here. But yet we're really concerned that there's gaps all over the place. And having that conversation with that client, we kind of proposed this as kind of pilot, and they found it really beneficial. So, this works. Like, this makes it easy, because, you buy a number of days at the start of the year. We agree that the amount of testing you need done across the year, generally, you buy a number of days, and then you get a resource assigned, or 2 resources typically, because, we don't, like, if Daniel wants to go on holidays, we can't just have him available all the time. We need to give him a few days off every now and again as well. Mm-hmm. So you have a second resource to jump in where Daniel's not available. And sometimes, as with the CISO as a service, that CISO or that pen tester that's assigned can't do everything. So you haven't got the experience in every aspect of it. So they'll call in somebody to do a BAS engagement, let's say, if they don't have experience in it, or do a bit of social engineering. So it's not that it's Daniel and that's it, or Daniel and one of his colleagues and that's it. It gives you the resource from across the team as well. But that one key player who gains more of an insight into your business, the business value of the different systems you're testing, and the prioritization, I suppose.
That actually ties in, Declan, nicely with a question that we'd had of, I had a traditional web application test done last year, Are you saying this was pointless?
No, so traditional web app pen testing are part of this new service as well. So there is value in doing a traditional pen testing. There could be a compliance requirement that you need to do it anyway, and you need to have that done for compliance and need a formal report on it. It does address the vulnerabilities in that one specific web application or whatever that you might have. So, it's valuable in that, and you're getting the recommendations there. The concern really is from our clients, and when we speak on our own or experience, is, we're missing things left or right of field of that web application. So focused, it's great. Doing a really good job. We have a really secure web application, but you know what? There's another service beside it that's wide open and hasn't been touched in years.
Yeah. Just to give you an idea then of the benefits. So pretty much all the benefits are appealing to one or more people. So like your most popular one would be the budget. Obviously got a lot of finance people or CEOs on this call. And full range of cyber testing options. So you'll be both happy to hear that. I'll give you those results at the end of this. So we actually have a bit of time for questions that have come in. So I might start with you, Daniel. So for configuration checks on endpoints, do you check Intune settings?
We can, like usually our endpoint assessment doesn't include this, but we do cloud assessments, and I have done in the past, and we would usually use the CIS benchmarks as a guide for these. So yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah.
Great. And are there any limitations on OS, Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, Linux, BSD?
No, there's no limitations. Like our scans are vendor agnostic, and in terms of iOS and Android, obviously you're going to have more problems testing an iOS application because they're inherently more secure. But we do iOS pen tests, and we do them quite often.
Great. Once we do a pen test, what do we do with the report?
I suppose what you should do with the report is you should take the recommendations, read them and understand them, and talk to Daniel about and get that feedback from Daniel of how, why is this an issue? Why is it a high issue for us? And that the reason it's a high issue is because of the impact. So, you're saying that from a business perspective, this is really important because this site is really important. So if this site goes down, we're going to lose money. We're going to lose a considerable amount of money. So we need to fix this technical issue. And the way to address that technical issue, some clients, and I'm not saying all are like this, but some clients get that report after the knowledge transfer conversation with Daniel, and it gets dropped on the desk, ends up in a drawer, and it's kind of forgotten about. And we've had occasion where clients came back and had a breach 6 months later and said, you tested this environment, but why were we breached? Because you didn't implement the recommendation in the report, obviously, because that the vulnerability is still there. So, we can't do more than that. But the right way to do it is to take those recommendations and put them into your risk register. So you're going back to governance again, and to make sure that they're sitting in your risk register to be addressed as you go. So you don't forget them, and the report doesn't sit in the drawer. They're there to be reviewed by your IT team and your security team, and prioritize again for fix, And the prioritizing that Daniel and the guys will give you are based on our experience, and and you need to pull that into your risk register, and that gives you a priority to fix those issues.
And I suppose it's handy that Ward and the wider Ekco group generally have a solution to handle whatever those vulnerabilities are. Last question. So if anybody has any more to pop in, please do so now. Should a vulnerability test be done prior to the ethical hack?
Yeah, so vulnerability testing is valid because that's really the first port of call of everything we do. So, if you take Daniel's experience of trying to do a perimeter pen test, the first thing you do is do a vulnerability scan to see what ports are open, check this list of IPs, see what ports are open. Some of them might be valid, so that we need an FTP server here, we need a web application sitting on this IP address, and there's a good valid business reason for having it there. So it's gathering that information and then highlighting the ones where there are ports open or windows open that shouldn't be open. So, you're expecting that this window is open because you have a web application and you need the public to go and have a look at that web application. but you're not expecting another window to be open that'll give you access to, you know, a share on your environment or a remote access to a share in your environment that will cause you pain. So as I said, a first protocol from the technical perspective is to run those scans. And again, when you've done a full web application pen test or an internet perimeter pen test or any pen test, you know, you're looking at trying to find those windows, trying to exploit to see, can I actually get through? So the pen test is taking it a stage further from the vulnerability scan. The vulnerability scan says there's a window open. The pen tester will try to get through that window. If you get through the window, well, then that's a big problem for you. And then there'll be recommendations how you should close that window. If you've done that pen testing, repeating the pen test again may, you know, not be valid, because, you know, if you're looking at this ethical hacking kind of concept, let's do a full-on pen test. We'll find all the problems. We'll do a vulnerability scan, which just takes a little bit less time. We'll see, you know, are those windows all closed? If they're all closed, well, then we can't do penetration testing again. So there's no point in repeating the pen testing again. But if there's something new that's opened up, or there's a new vulnerability published, you know, that a certain window has some vulnerability, that the lock is a bit dodgy on this window, we look at that window again and say, you know, can we get through that window, because this new vulnerability is out there published. Can we exploit this new information we have to try get through that window, which we previously couldn't get through?
Great. One actually did come in. Now, I know it's difficult to kind of talk about pricing and cost because everything is so different, but how does the cost model compare to traditional pen testing? So if a customer does 2 or 3 tests per year, costing an average of 5K each, would there be any saving to be leveraged with the service-based approach?
Well, I suppose there's a number of areas where they're saving. One is in the management and the organization. From a client perspective, you're not having your resources spending time trying to set this up. So you're going to set it up once, and you're going to do the testing across the year. 2, on our side, we're going to not have to spend as much time either getting on those calls. So there's no, you know, we can reduce the amount of kickoff calls and, you know, the interactions with the clients, because we've gathered all that information once, hopefully, and we can work through the engagement at that. It depends on how often you want to meet the pen tester to discuss and refocus, you know, so that has a cost in there, and then the rest of the time is just spent doing pen testing. So there is, it's hard to put figures on it, but like what we'd like to do is to, I suppose, work with you and understand what are the limitations of your budget and what are the things you would like to get done across the year, and then put some amount of time against them. Typically, in the same manner as we do with CISO as a service, you know, we go to a client and say, you know, typically on the governance side, clients are saying, you know, I need to do a bit of alignment to ISO 27001. I have problems around my data protection. I have a system there I'd like somebody to have a quick look at and see, you know, are we doing the process right? I need to write a few policies. If you're to individually go to each one of those, you're going to have a scope, you're going to have, you know, a purchase order, all that process stuff, and you're going to add overhead from a project management and all into that engagement. Whereas as CISO as a service, you buy a bucket of days that will cover, you know, generally, you know, we're kind of finger in the air how much time you need to spend in each area. But it'll cover those aspects of what you need to get done, and then you can refocus, you know, so you can say, okay, you know, let's not spend 15 days doing a full-on risk assessment or a full-on pen test. Let's spend 10 days doing the pen test, and let's do a vulnerability scan later on in 3 months' time, because that makes more sense to us, you know. And it's really that collaboration between the pen tester understanding, you know, what makes sense. If I was a hacker, where would I be going? You know, what would I be trying to do in your environment? Because I understand your environment now, and I know how to protect you, you know.
Yeah, so it's a bit more business focused as to a tick the box kind of exercise.
Yeah. That was a real political answer, by the way.
Look, I think that's all the direct questions have dried up, so we'll leave it there. And also this noise is still going on in the background here. So thank you so much for all your questions and for your time and for sticking around, actually. And most importantly, thank you to Daniel and Declan for their delivery today. If you have any questions, their emails are up on the screen, but we will be in touch tomorrow with the slide deck and the recording if you want to watch it over and over. And listen, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and appreciate you dropping in. And thanks, Paige and Kirsten, for setting us up, and Daniel for keeping himself in a job.
Thanks, guys.
You live to fight another day, Daniel. Bye.